Scientists in Florida were tracking a 13-foot python named Loki. They'd been following this 52-pound monster for 6 breeding seasons, using his signal to find female pythons and their nests. But when they finally reached his location in December, they found something that stopped them cold. Loki's massive body was sprawled in the grass, but his head was completely gone, chewed off and buried under pine needles like a hidden trophy. The researchers stood there, stunned. This was an apex predator. Nothing in the Everglades should be able to do this. They set up a trail camera, and what came back the next day changed everything scientists thought they knew about Florida's python war. But to understand why this discovery is so shocking, you gotta go back to where this whole nightmare started. August 1992. Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 monster, tears through South Florida with winds screaming at 165 miles per hour. The storm flattens neighborhoods and rips apart a reptile breeding facility near Miami. When the winds finally die down, an unknown number of Burmese pythons slip away into the wetlands. But here's the thing. That storm wasn't the only problem. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Burmese pythons were the hot new exotic pet. People bought them as tiny $10 snakes, thinking they were cool. But those cute snakes don't stay small. They grow fast. A snake that fits in your hand becomes a 10-foot, 50-pound monster in just a few years. And they don't stop there. They can reach over 20 feet long and weigh over 200 pounds, heavy enough to take down a full-grown deer. Overwhelmed owners who were now stuck with a giant dangerous predator did the only thing they could think of. They drove to the edge of the Everglades and just let them go. They thought they were setting them free. Instead, they were lighting a fuse on an ecological time bomb. For years, nobody paid much attention. A few sightings here, and they were just curiosities. But the pythons weren't just surviving. They were thriving. The Everglades was a python's paradise. The heat, the humidity, the endless shallow water, and a massive buffet of native animals that had zero natural defenses. They'd never in their entire evolutionary history faced a predator like this. The Burmese python is a monster of engineering, masters of camouflage, vanishing into the grass. They can hold their breath underwater for over 30 minutes. And the craziest part, they have thermal sensing pits along their jaws. They can literally see the body heat of a warm-blooded animal in total darkness. A raccoon doesn't stand a chance. And then there's the breeding. A single female can lay up to 100 eggs. With no natural predators to keep them in check, their population went vertical. Today, experts estimate there are anywhere from 30,000 to over 300,000 pythons slithering through South Florida. The numbers are so bad they sound fake. In the hardest-hit areas of the Everglades, raccoon populations have dropped by 99.3%. Possums are down 98.9%. Bobcats have fallen by 87.5%. Think about that. Not 10%, not 50%. 99% gone. Erased. Biologists who've worked in the Everglades for decades talk about the silence. They remember driving down the loop roads and having to stop for raccoons or turtles. Now they see nothing for miles, for days. The small mammals that form the entire foundation of the food web have been vacuumed up. The invaders had found heaven, and they were consuming it whole. And that's when Florida finally had to act. But their first attempts looked more like a circus than a solution. The unwinnable war. In 2013, officials launched the Florida Python Challenge. Part publicity stunt, part desperate lottery ticket. They invited the public, basically anyone brave enough or crazy enough to wade into the swamp and hunt the giant invaders. They offered cash prizes, including a $10,000 grand prize for the person who removed the most snakes. It became an annual spectacle. By 2025, over 930 participants from 30 states and Canada showed up. They were armed with traps, snake hooks, and nerves of steel. That year, they captured a record 294 Burmese pythons. The headlines were great. The photos were dramatic. It felt like a victory. But here's the deal. Let's do the math. They removed 294 snakes. Let's be generous and take the lowest possible estimate. 30,000 pythons in the wild. Removing 294 of them is less than 1% of the population. If the real number is closer to 300,000, the impact is statistically zero. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon while the tide is coming in. So the state got more serious. They brought in professionals. The South Florida Water Management District hired elite paid hunters, career python chasers paid to stalk the levees and swamps day and night, year-round. Since 2017, these contractors have removed thousands of pythons. Combined with all other efforts, over 23,000 pythons have been taken out of the wild. It sounds impressive. It is impressive. But even that massive number, the result of years of dedicated work, is likely less than 10% of the total population. For every one snake they find, 20 more hatch hidden in the endless sawgrass. Frustrated, Florida turned to high-tech warfare. They launched drones equipped with thermal cameras, thinking they could spot the snake's heat signatures from above. But there was a problem. The Everglades is hot. The ground is hot. The water is hot. And pythons are cold-blooded. They're masters at regulating their body temperature to match their surroundings. To a thermal camera, a resting python looks just like a warm rock or a patch of mud. The drones were a bust. Then they tried robot rabbits. Engineers designed fake rabbits that gave off heat and made sounds, trying to lure the pythons into an ambush. It failed. Pythons are ambush predators. They wait perfectly still for real prey to cross their path. They weren't interested in noisy, clunky robots. The most successful idea involved using scout snakes, also called Judas snakes. Researchers would capture a large male python, surgically implant a tiny radio transmitter, and then release it right back into the wild during mating season. The male, driven by instinct, would lead them right to a giant egg-filled female. This program has worked. It's led to the removal of some of the biggest, most productive breeding females. But it's incredibly slow, incredibly expensive, and it's a game of inches in a war that needs miles. The tech was failing. The hunters were outmatched. Years of effort, millions of dollars in funding, and an endless list of failed experiments all pointed to the same sobering truth. The pythons had won. Scientists began to admit it publicly. Full eradication is impossible. But while Florida was fighting this losing battle against a visible enemy, something invisible was spreading through the swamps. Something that would make the python problem look like child's play. The invisible plague. During routine examinations of native Florida snakes, scientists started finding something horrifying. Native species, garter snakes, pygmy rattlesnakes, water snakes, were emaciated, weak, struggling to breathe. When they opened them up, they found a horror show. Their lungs and airways were clogged with dozens, sometimes hundreds of tiny, writhing worms. They quickly traced the source. This lungworm, called Rheal orientalis, originally comes from Asia, the native home of the Burmese python. Over thousands of years, the pythons and this parasite co-evolved. The pythons can carry the lungworm, but it rarely causes them serious harm. They're used to it. They have defenses. But Florida's native snakes have zero natural defense. It's a brand new alien enemy. And here's the deal on how this new plague spreads. The life cycle is terrifyingly simple. An infected python poops in the swamp. Those droppings contain the lungworm's eggs. Cockroaches and other insects feed on the waste, and the eggs hatch inside them. Lizards and frogs eat those infected insects. Finally, native Florida snake eats that infected frog or lizard. Once inside the snake's body, the larvae begin their journey. They don't stay in the stomach. They tunnel through the stomach wall and migrate directly into the lungs. There they grow, feed on blood and tissue, and reproduce. They clog the snake's airways until it can't breathe.